Speaking of childhood fantasies, this is going to transition us into our topic. Your return to the WWE in 2008, but it really starts in 2007. You're working in Noah, you're teaming with Bull Buchanan.
Hmm.
How does the connection get made in 2007 to you working some dark matches for the WWE at MSG and Mohegan Sun?
Funny thing was, that weekend I was doing some independent shows in the Northeast, and I had reached out to Ron and to see if he was on the show, and I was like, "Hey, let's get together after the show," because I wasn't part of the company. I wasn't just going to show up at, of all places, Madison Square Garden and stand back there. And he goes,
Right.
"Why don't you come to the show with me?" And I go, "You sure?" He goes, "Yeah, come on, you just come hang out." So went to Madison Square Garden, and I think it was Bruce Pritchard who saw me at first, and they were like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm just hanging out with Ron." And then as you go through and you start talking, people go, "You got your gear with you?" And they go, "It's at the hotel. I can get it in no time." And went back, got it, and had a dark match, and that's how the conversation started about um, potentially coming back. It was okay. Let's do this again tomorrow night. We went to Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, had a match there, and then that next couple days, it was the conversation started, and I had to finish up with Noah before I could make my way back to WWE.
Were you in conversation with John Laurinaitis? Was it Bruce Pritchard? Was it Vince McMahon? Who was
It was
the
it was
contact?
Johnny Ace. He and I talked several times, and he's the one that finally put a pen to paper and got me back there. So yeah, I was always in touch with Johnny Ace, and then it took several months for me to finish up with Noah, and then I made my way back to, I think I debuted in a dark match like in Oklahoma City or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was Oklahoma City.
So the conversation begins in middle of 2007. You finish up with Noah and you run there, and then you join the company in 2008.
Hmm.
Was the only thing that was holding you up from getting back into the company was your commitments to Noah?
Yeah, pretty much. That was the only thing keeping me out of the loop for a while. And
Dave,
I like to honor my obligations.
Dave Meltzer wrote in the Observer, D'Lo Brown, who worked for the company from 1997 to 2003, although he was largely kicked to the curb by 2001 as far as being on the regular roster, was signed this past week. Most likely, this is part of Vince's, and that's being Vince McMahon's, wanting African Americans on television. Part of it is a decrease of the demo in the ratings, in part with Booker T and Bobby Lashley leaving, and any racism controversy stemming from having Michael Hayes on the creative team makes them a sitting duck for future controversy if they don't push African Americans. Were you aware of any of the issues that were going on in the company that were reported here in the Observer?
None whatsoever. Obviously, when I wasn't in the company, I really wasn't paying attention to the product. And in being, going back and forth to Japan, I was disconnected. You would hear things, but it wasn't my company, so I really didn't care. And I didn't hear any of that or pay attention to any of that stuff. Um, all I knew is when I went back to go see them, they invited me to come back, and that was about it.
Do you think your race had anything to do with it at all?
I hope not.
Okay.
I hope in even as in 2007 or 8, my race had nothing to do with it, and my it was all about my skill and who I was as a person. Um, do I can I put it past them to say race was a part of it? Because I'm not in that decision making room, and I don't know. But part of me, a large part of me, hopes race had nothing to do with it.
There was an interesting clip. You recently did a podcast that was on your Instagram story. And if you don't follow D'Lo, you should. D'Lo Brown LFC on Instagram, where they talked about you caning Tommy Dreamer. Now, this is back before your return to the company. You're with Teddy
Yeah.
Long for that short period of time, but it's you caning Tommy Dreamer. Why did it feel like there was a lot of racial overtones in some of the creative? Do you think that was just something that Vince enjoyed?
I once I don't know, and it was a weird thing, and it was on MLK Day, and it was a Singapore cane match, and it literally, I remember making the joke to Ron, going, "I'm going to cane a white guy on MLK Day," and I don't know why the race thing was coming up or being part of stuff. Um, I had well, part of me once again hope and pray that we would get past racial use of race in anything, and using stereotypical tropes to create a talent. But then when you're given something, you go out there and try to do the best you can with it. Was I uncomfortable with it? Yeah. But I got to hit Tommy Dreamer with a cane, so who cares?
Sure.
Yeah.
He enjoyed
How many
it.
people can say that? Well, a lot of people can say
A
they
lot
hit
of
Tommy
people.
with a cane. Never mind. Never
Yeah.
mind.
What I think is my favorite part of that is you having to sell into the camera and knowing how much Vince McMahon reveres Martin Luther King to do it
Yes.
on MLK Day. The irony wasn't lost on me. And I completely forgot about that podcast clip. And then when we were talking about doing this episode, I'm like, it's just so interesting to me, the dynamics. There were differences in the company from 1997, from even in 2002, and now your return in 2008. What was
Mhm.
one of the bigger things that you noticed was different for the company on this latest return?
The entire roster locker room had changed over. Um, I went from being in 2000, even 2003, one of the mainstays there who was always in the locker room, one of the familiar faces, to when I went back in '08, there were one or two or three guys that I even had ever touched before in the ring, and it was a whole different crop of young talent that had come up. And then little things like I'm in a match and I'm doing, check my arm, and one of the referees in the middle of the match go, "We're not allowed to do that anymore." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, that's okay. It's wrestling. Okay, I won't do it." Just different rules that you couldn't do anymore. Um, Different things you couldn't do anymore. And then the whole change over to locker room. It was a different company, different world by the time I got back in '08.
Do you think it was for the better?
It was just a different company.
A lot of
I will
people, a lot
Go
of
ahead.
people would say things had gotten overproduced by 2008. Would you
It
agree
was a
with that?
lot overproduced. I remember doing an interview segment, and this was the first time I did an interview segment, and they wanted me to say everything I was going to say in the promo. And my first reaction was, I don't know what I'm going to say in the promo because I was taught to create the promo in the moment. And when we did the walkthrough, it was do everything like you're going to do tonight on TV. And to me, I'd never even experienced it. I had been through some walkthroughs where it was, all right, we'll do this, yada, 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 move forward. No, it was A, B, C, D. It was paint by numbers. And that struck me as odd. And I chalked it up to, okay, it's a very young roster. Vince wants to make sure that they go out there and put their best foot forward. But then I came to the realization that it had been that way. It's that way. It was that way across the entire company. That it was everything was micromanaged to a point where there was less creativity, improv, and more Emmy worthy acting.